Jon Jones unfortunately suffered a pec rupture while he was wrestling here, and in this video we're going to talk about how this injury happened, since it might seem unusual to see a pec rupture occur while not bench pressing. Welcome back everybody, I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer. My goal in this channel is to help teach you more about the medical side of the sports world. Let's get right to the footage here of when this injury happened. And it might seem unusual, right? Because usually when we see people rupture their pec, they're bench pressing. They're putting a lot of serious load through their pec muscle. But in Jon Jones's case here, all he was doing was wrestling. Now, of course, as we see him come up right where he's pointing, this is the area where the pec muscle and tendon insert into the humerus. And so we're looking at this left side. And what happens if we still understand the anatomy of the pec? Here, as Jon goes for this takedown and as he's rolling kind of his partner around here, look at the position of his left arm. So his left arm is up here, his head is somewhere down here. And so as he progresses through this wrestling kind of takedown attempt, we can see how much his left arm is going to get bent backwards behind him into what we call a humeral extension position, where his arm is stretched back this way. And of course, that stretching the humerus back behind you, no matter what's going on at the elbow, right? Remember, the pec tendon inserts out here at the humerus just below the shoulder. So it doesn't really matter what you're doing with your elbow. It doesn't matter if your elbow is extended or your elbow is flexed. All that matters is the position of your humerus relative to your chest. So keep an eye here as Jon goes for this takedown. What happens right about there? We can see how his head is positioned down here and his arm, his humerus, is coming back up this way behind him. He's also, as he does this takedown attempt, he's trying to push forward with that pec. He's trying to adduct or bring his arm in this way to help allow him to get this takedown move. But during this whole sequence, his arm is being pulled backwards behind him. That's going to eccentrically stretch his pec. As his pec gets pulled back behind him, he then goes to kind of adduct suddenly here as he goes for this takedown. And that right there is going to be when that pec gets overstretched and ruptured. When we look at our biodigital anatomy tool here, there are two pec muscles. There's the pectoralis major and the pectoralis minor. Pectoralis major is the big one that sits on the top. That's what we see that makes up the bulk of our pec muscle. And then behind that is going to be the pectoralis minor. The pectoralis minor actually is a very flat, very small muscle, comes up and inserts on this bump of the shoulder blade called the coracoid process right here. Honestly, this pec minor muscle seems to cause more problems than it does help with things, just from what I see in clinic. But the pec major, of course, is going to be the main tendon that we're talking about. You can see here where it inserts out on the humerus. Now the biceps is going to be running just deep to it, and that's actually something we look at on ultrasound when we're looking for a pec rupture, is the biceps tendon anchored down flat against the humerus in this little groove to suggest that the pec tendon is still intact or if the pec tendon has ruptured. But think again, muscles and tendons act like ropes, and so if you take the humerus right here and you bring it back this direction, that's going to put tension and stretch on the pec tendon. So if your pec is stretched, your humerus is extended back behind you, and then you go and try and forcefully adduct to activate and bring that arm in across, that's when the pec muscle is susceptible to rupture, whether you're bench pressing or if you're just trying to bring somebody down. And remember, he's a heavy guy, so this is still a lot of load going through his pec and not entirely unusual or unexpected to see it happen despite not being a bench press. Two things to wrap up. First of all, there's of course going to be this question and this assumption of steroid use, because we often associate or think about this association between steroid use and big ruptures like pec ruptures, but that's not really the right way to think about it. There's another thinking with it that it's more so bodybuilders, it's people who are doing a lot of weightlifting who rupture their pecs, and that is just so happens to be the same population that are using steroid. There doesn't necessarily seem to be a one-to-one correlation of direct causation of using steroids leading to pec rupture. So in no way can we assume that just because he ruptured a pec that he must be using steroids. The other thought that people have with this is that tendons take a longer time to adapt. And so whenever you're trying to put on a bunch of mass, especially for somebody like Jon who went from light heavyweight to heavyweight, when you're trying to build up a lot of mass really quickly, your muscle adapts. Your muscle gets bigger and stronger quicker than the pace at which your tendon can adapt to be able to tolerate the load that the muscle is wanting to pull through it. That probably is more likely in this case. And somebody who's tried to put on a lot of mass recently, pec muscle is going to get much bigger than the rate at which the tendon can adapt, which can make the tendon more predisposed to injury. And also just age. As we get older, our tendons become a little bit more unable to tolerate that load. They get a little bit stiffer, and so that can also lead to more likelihood of a rupture. The final thing is what this means for Jones's career. And I'll be honest, whenever we see an injury like this that happens to somebody who has already hinted that they're at the tail end of their career, it makes me wonder about if they're even going to come back and if we'll ever see Jon fight again. Not because a pec rupture is something that functionally would hinder an athlete, but just because of what Dana said. The recovery is going to be a long time. It's going to be a while before he can fight, and you never know what else can transpire when that 6 to 12 months means so much more to somebody at the end of their career than it does to somebody who's just starting out. Of course, also factoring in the part here with Stipe. Stipe might not want to stick around and go through all this again to potentially have a fight canceled 8 months or a year from now. And so that fight might be off the table, which might make Jon not want to fight at all. So this unfortunately could be the end of Jon Jones' career. Again, not because of what we see with the functional decline after a pec rupture. That should have no impact on him. But just how the rest of the heavyweight division and the rest of everybody's lives might go forward if Jon truly doesn't want to wait and have this one last fight. That's it for the video, everybody. Let me know as always any questions or comments down below. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.